we operated as independent companies. And so it was a strange situation because for 3 years there would be officers in the regiment who you actually never met. And I've met some now, recently, playing golf, who said, oh, we were in the One Queen's together in Malaya. And I never met him because he was in a different company and we were miles, 50, 60, 100 miles apart, and only appeared at battalion headquarters maybe once or twice a month when we were dispatched to go and collect the pay. But the operations were, I suppose, 95% on a guessing basis. We just patrolled as a platoon, split up into small parties of small groups of 3 or 4, and just fanning and covering the jungle looking for signs of terrorists. And that was how it worked. We'd go into the jungle for maybe 2 weeks if we were carrying our food, and we could actually survive for 2 weeks without resupply, which was quite difficult with the army issue ration pack, most of which got discarded. And we would just hope to find something. Now, very occasionally, we would find a camp, mostly unoccupied. There was one occasion when I was very fortunate, when I had a young officer with me under instruction called Foster, and he and I were at the head of the platoon, and we came over a rock and came face to face with a group of Chinese terrorists. Michael Foster actually shot the first chap, who turned out to be the equivalent to a brigadier, immediately, from about 3 yards range, straight through the head. As we ran through the camp, I grabbed his hat, which I have to this day in my study. I was fired at by his bodyguard, who missed with the first round. Unfortunately, his Tommy gun jammed with the second. We hit him and then captured him wounded. Unfortunately, he died before we could get him out of the jungle, which was very thick at the time. So that was a lucky operation. It wasn't on information, we just came across it. Personally, I loved it. I was, of course, young, unmarried. You had an exciting job to do. You knew you could do it well or you could do it badly. You were undoubtedly frightened at times. I do remember one occasion when we were told there was an ambush set up for us and we had to go and find it. Well, the only way to find it was to walk into it. And that was scary. And, people say, oh, so-and-so's a brave man. Nobody's a brave man. My biggest fear was to be considered a coward by my soldiers. Therefore, you do brave things because you're frightened of being thought to be a coward. I remember that particularly. And it was possible to go for up to 14 days with what you carried. Now, that was pretty rough, and you weren't using any of the army rations. You took some rice, some dried thing called ikan bilis in Malaya, which is a dried fish. That was probably not very good for the health, but you could survive. But by and large, we used to go out carrying 6 days' rations. Now, 6 24-hour packs simply don't begin to fit into even the biggest Bergen if you take the whole thing, and we didn't have Bergens. So the first thing was we binned most of it. Each ration pack had 3 packets of biscuits. That went straight into the wastepaper basket in the basher before we set off. We kept out the things that we liked and were prepared to eat, and not the rest of the stuff. And it was fairly rough. We would supplement it, if we could, with things we'd find: monkeys, snakes, tortoises. Even once we came across a wild pig in a Aborigine trap. That was a great luxury. But you could supplement it, and sometimes in the bigger rivers even fish. But I remember coming out of the jungle once and was sent for by the CO because there was a conference in Kuala Lumpur at headquarters Malaya Command to decide on the contents of the ration pack of the future. A new one was being decided from locally purchased products, apparently. So I went up to this conference. There were about 40 people at this conference. I think I was the only one who had ever been into the jungle. It was full of staff officers and ordnance experts and doctors. And I said the sort of things I've just said. I said, we've got to go in there for 14 days, or perhaps 7 days, carrying it. It's no good producing these frightfully smart things with all the calories you need if you can't physically lift it. And they said, but this pack we're designing is no greater than the 24-hour pack that you're issued with now. And I said, yes, and 90% of that 24-hour pack goes into the waste paper basket in the barrack room before we go out. It's not eaten, so there's no point in having it because it's heavy and we can't cope with it. And I remember particularly a very senior doctor, he was probably a colonel, getting extremely angry, saying that's absolutely almost a court-martial offence. He said, you need all the calories in this ration pack. It is specifically designed. I said, fine, you've got to make it lighter. But that was the attitude.